درود پڑھنے میں آواز بلند اللہم صلی علی یا محمد یا محمد یا ایسی عزت آپ نے پائی کہ بس کی شب اسرار خدا نے وہ پذیرائی کہ بس یا محمد ایک پل میں مصطفیٰ کو عرش پر بلوا لیا ایک پل میں مصطفیٰ کو عرش پر بلوا لیا اپنے بندے کی خدا کو ایسی یاد آئی کہ بس یا محمد گنتے گنتے تھک گئیں تاروں کی نازک انگلیاں گنتے گنتے تھک گئی تاروں کی نازک انگلیاں مصطفیٰ کے ہیں زمین پر اتنے شیدائی کہ بس یا محمد میں نے جلتی دھوپ میں جب چھیڑ دی نعت رسول رحمتوں کی ہر طرف ایسی گھٹا چھائی کہ بس یا محمد ایک دن میں لکھنے بیٹھا تھا شب ہجرت کا حال کیا کہوں یارو مجھے بھی ایسی نیند آئی کہ بس یا محمد دیکھ اب بھی وقت ہے دامن نبی کا تھام لے ورنہ کل محشر میں ہوگی ایسی رسوائی کہ بس یا محمد ان فرشتوں نے ابھی پوچھا ہی کیا تھا اے سروش دفعتاً میرے سرہانے سے صدا آئی کہ بس یا محمد ایسی عزت آپ نے پائی کہ بس یا محمد. درود پڑھ لیں.
اور محمد وآل محمد صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم. آپ سب کو شب معراج مبارک ہو. اسی محمد سے کلام. یوں لگا جب ثنائے علی ہو گئی، یوں لگا جب ثنائے علی ہو گئی، گپ اندھیرا تھا اور روشنی ہو گئی. کر رہا تھا تلاوت میں قرآن کی، کر رہا تھا تلاوت میں قرآن کی، خود بخود مدح مولا علی ہو گئی، خود بخود مدح مولا علی ہو گئی. صلوات. زمیں تا عرش معلا علی نظر آئے، زمیں تا عرش معلا علی نظر آئے، جہاں نگاہ نے دیکھا علی نظر آئے، جہاں نگاہ نے دیکھا علی نظر آئے. ہوئی تھی سر معراج رب سے بات مگر، ہوئی تھی سر معراج رب سے بات مگر، رسول کو پس لہجہ علی نظر آئے، رسول کو پس لہجہ علی نظر آئے. ایک وقت میں 40 مختلف جا پہ، ایک وقت میں 40 مختلف جا پہ، مخالفوں نے بتایا علی نظر آئے، مخالفوں نے بتایا علی نظر آئے. جناب مولا حسن سے سخی قلندر تک، جناب مولا حسن سے سخی قلندر تک، ہر ایک بیٹا علی کا علی نظر آئے، ہر ایک بیٹا علی کا علی نظر آئے. حسد کی آگ میں شیخین جل گئے خون میں، حسد کی آگ میں شیخین جل گئے خون میں، نبی کے ساتھ جو مولا علی نظر آئے، نبی کے ساتھ جو مولا علی نظر آئے، کسی کو رام کسی کو خدا کسی کو ولی، کسی کو رام کسی کو خدا کسی کو ولی، کہ جس میں ظرف تھا جیسا علی نظر آئے، کہ جس میں ظرف تھا جیسا علی نظر آئے، تیرا عقیدہ توحید ڈگمگائے اگر، تیرا عقیدہ توحید ڈگمگائے اگر، خدا کو کرتے نہ سجدہ علی نظر آئے، خدا کو کرتے نہ سجدہ علی نظر آئے، یہ خون ساقی کوثر کا فیض ہے یاسر، یہ خون ساقی کوثر کا فیض ہے یاسر، علی کا سارا گھرانہ علی نظر آئے، علی کا سارا گھرانہ علی نظر آئے، زمین عرش مولا علی نظر آئے، جہاں نگاہ نے دیکھا علی نظر آئے، سلوات
صلی علی محمد وآل محمد۔ اعوذ باللہ من الشیطان الرجیم، بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم، الحمد للہ الذی لا یبلغ مدحتہ القائلون ولا یوسی نعمہ العادون ولا یؤدی حقہ المجتہدون، الذی لا یدرکہ بحد الہمم ولا ینالہ غوث الفتن، الذي ليس لصفته حد محدود ولا نعت موجود ولا وقت محدود ولا أجل ممدود، فطر الخلائق بقدرته ونشر الرياح برحمته ووتد بالسخر ميدان عرض، ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وحبيبنا وحبيب رب العالمين بالقاسم محمد، وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين، واللعن على أعدائهم أجمعين من أول يوم ظلمهم إلى قيام يوم الدين، أما بعد، فقال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المبين وقوله الحق، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، سبحان الذي أسرى بعبده ليلا من المسجد الحرام إلى المسجد الأقصى الذي باركنا حوله لنريه من آياتنا إنه هو السميع البصير. صدق الله العلي العظيم. Before we begin, please recite Surah Fatiha for the marhumin of Brother Farhan Mirza. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. اللهم اغفره وارحمه واسكنه بجوار محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. صل على محمد وآل محمد. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As you're all aware, we're gathered here tonight to commemorate the Meraaj of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this was an event that happened, or this was an event that occurred 1400 years ago, but to this day, not just the awam an-nas, but even within Islam, the scholars of Islam, they themselves have questions about the Meraaj. And there's some differences of opinion between the schools of thought when it comes to the Meraaj. For example, within Islam itself, there's a difference of opinion whether or not this Meraaj of Rasulullah was bodily or was it spiritual. Was this figurative? Was this literal? Was it a dream that the Holy Prophet saw or no? Did he literally go on this Meraaj? And when it comes to people from outside of Islam, when you tell them about the Meraaj, and you tell them that the Holy Prophet went to the heavens, he saw how hell looked like, he saw what the inhabitants of hell, he saw the inhabitants of heaven. When you tell them this, they start asking questions about how is this possible? If you tell us that the Holy Prophet went from this world, he went to the heavens, then he must have passed through all the barriers that you need to pass through. You must have passed through the atmosphere, you must have gone through space. How is this possible? Because it is against the laws of physics. It is against the laws of biology, correct? And to get rid of some of these misconceptions and to answer some of these questions, whether or not it is possible, that's what I want to look at today. But to begin with, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He talks about the Holy Prophet's Meraaj in a few surahs of the Quran. And one of the surahs that He talks about the Meraaj is Surah Al-Isra. Isra itself is the Meraaj. And in this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Subhanallazi asra'a bi abdihi laylan min al-masjid al-harami ila al-masjid al-aqsa. Allazi barakna hawlahu. Linuriyahu min ayati. Correct? From this verse itself, we understand a couple of things. When you start analyzing these verses of the Quran, especially this verse, one of the things that you understand is, first and foremost, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what is He doing? Subhanallazi. What is subhan? Is praise, correct? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is praising. He's praising who? Who's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praising in this verse? Subhanallazi asra bi abdihi. May praise, may glory be to Him who made His servant go through the Meraaj. So who's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praising? No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is praising Himself because He's the one who made the Holy Prophet go through Meraaj. One, if this Meraaj was just a dream, what need is there for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to praise Himself? If the Meraaj is just a dream, what need is there for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to praise Himself? Why? Because in a dream, I do so many stuff in my dream that I can't do in my real life. For example, I can fly in my dream. Correct? I can do so many things that I can't do in real life. So if it was just a dream, then what is the point or what is the benefit? Why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praise Himself for showing the Holy Prophet a dream? One. Two, if this was just a spiritual ascension, what is the praise in that? If this was a spiritual ascension, what is the need for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to praise himself? The spirit, when it disconnects from the body, what happens to it? It's free to do what it wants. It's free from the body now. Then it's free, correct? The only reason Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would praise himself is if he made his prophet do something that was what? That defies everything that man can think of. This bodily Meraaj, it defies everything that man thinks of up to this point. What do I mean? Today, like I said, one of the questions they ask is, how is it possible that the Holy Prophet went on this ascension, went on this Meraaj? Why? Because it defies what? As I said in the question, it defies the laws of physics. It defies the laws of biology. The only reason that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would praise himself is if he can do something that defies something that you and I think is not defiable. Correct? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he starts off, Subhanallazi asra bi abdihi. Correct? Bi abdihi. Let's look at the word abd. What does the word abd denote? Abd, it denotes servitude. Correct? Abd, it means servant, correct? But a servant, is their ruh, is their spirit a servant, or is their whole existence a servant? Servitude has to do with what? Their whole existence, meaning their spirit and their body, not just their spirit. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Subhanalladhi asra bi abdihi, that means what? That means that it was the whole body, not just the spirit that ascended, but it was also the body of Rasulullah that ascended. Because abd, the word abd, it denotes not just the spirit, but it denotes the body as well. And when it comes to this, in the time of Harun Rashid, the scholars at that time, when I say the scholars, I'm talking about the Sunni scholars, they were debating about whether or not this Meraaj, this ascension of the Holy Prophet, was bodily or was it just spiritual. And Bahlul, he was just listening to them. They kept debating, they kept debating, they kept debating. Bahlul, he just stayed quiet. When it came time for prayer, Bahlul, he tells Harun Rashid, do you allow me to lead prayers? Do you allow me to lead prayer? Look at the aql of Harun Rashid. He himself, he claims that Bahlul is crazy. Can a crazy person lead prayers? A crazy person is not allowed to lead prayers. Yet Harun Rashid, he tells Bahlul, Bahlul, you can go lead prayers. Bahlul, you can lead prayers. Bahlul, he leads the prayers. And when he leads the prayers, because they were debating whether or not this Meraaj was bodily or just spiritual, Bahlul, he starts off the prayer after Surah Al-Hamd, he starts off this surah. When he starts off the surah, instead of saying Subhanalladhi asra bi abdihi, he says Subhanalladhi asra bi ruhihi. He says this one time. The ulama, the scholars that were praying behind him, they yell in a loud voice, bi abdihi. What does he do? He starts over. When he starts over, he says bi ruhihi in a louder voice. Behind, they say again bi abdihi in a much louder voice. A third time this happens. When from behind him, for the third time, they say bi abdihi. He breaks his salat and he turns around and he says, what are you guys talking about? For so long, you guys were debating about bi ruhihi or bi abdihi. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says bi abdihi, why are you telling me? Why are you saying bi abdihi? I'm saying bi ruhi. You guys are saying that Allah, the Holy Prophet, he went to the Meraaj. It was a spiritual Meraaj. Well, the Quran is saying that this was a bodily Meraaj. For a couple of hours, you guys have been debating here whether or not this was a bodily or a spiritual Meraaj. When the Quran itself is saying that this was a bodily Meraaj, then why don't you guys stay quiet about the topic? It was a bodily Meraaj. But bi abdihi, laylan minal masjid al-harami ilal masjid al-aqsa. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. This masjid al-haram is which masjid? Kaaba. Masjid al-Haram is where the Kaaba is. Masjid al-Aqsa. What masjid is this? Bayt al-Muqaddas. That's what everyone says, correct? But this Masjid al-Aqsa, we have narrations that say that this Masjid al-Aqsa that is being talked about here is not the one that is in Jerusalem. One. Two, when people hear Masjid al-Aqsa, what do they think of? The gold dome, correct? That is not Masjid al-Aqsa. And a lot of Muslims do not know this. The images that you see of the gold dome from Palestine, that is not Masjid al-Aqsa, but because that is the most famous masjid in Palestine, everyone says that that is Masjid. No. To be honest, Masjid al-Aqsa, that masjid, do you know when it was created and who it was created by? That masjid was created by Umar. When he was expanding the empire, he's the one who created, he had that masjid created. Masjid al-Aqsa, the one that according to some of the narrations that the Holy Prophet went to, that masjid still exists today. But the sad part is when Muslims, they go to Palestine, they do the ziyarat of that golden dome and they leave the real Masjid al-Aqsa. Why? Because they think that that's the Masjid al-Aqsa. When in reality, that's not Masjid al-Aqsa. Masjid al-Aqsa is right next to that gold dome masjid, and it's very dilapidated, meaning it's run down. It hasn't been fixed. The Muslims have spent millions, billions, however much. They spent all of that money fixing a masjid that is not even related to the Holy Prophet. But to this day, they go there and they say, oh, this masjid is connected to the Holy Prophet. It's not. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says what? He made the Holy Prophet ascend on that night journey from Masjid al-Haram to Masjid al-Aqsa. Allazi barakna hawlahu. This is why some of the narrations that say that Masjid al-Aqsa here is not that Masjid al-Aqsa that you see over there. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Allazi barakna hawlahu. Meaning that we have blessed the precincts of this masjid. The Masjid al-Aqsa that this verse is talking about, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we have blessed the precincts of this masjid. If it is literally the Masjid al-Aqsa that is in Palestine, can you tell me if the surroundings of that masjid have been blessed? You look at it today, what blessings do you see around that masjid? No, there's no, what blessings do you see? If I was to ask you, what blessings do you see? That's why some of the narrations, they said that this Masjid al-Aqsa is not referring to that masjid literally. No, this Masjid al-Aqsa is a masjid up in the sky, it was in the heavens. That Masjid al-Aqsa that's down here, for example, like the Kaaba. The Kaaba is a replica of a replica of a replica. The Kaaba. It's a replica of a replica of a replica. What do I mean? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He asked all the angels to bow down to Hazrat Adam alayhi salam, what did the angels say? Ya Allah, you're going to make that person a Khalifa who's going to shed blood on earth while we praise you and we do your hamd? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what does He say? He says to them, you don't know what I know, correct? Up until this point, these angels would be doing the tawaf of Baytul Ma'mur. Baytul Ma'mur was a place where these angels would be doing tawaf. When they said this to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He took them away from Baytul Ma'mur. When He took them away from Baytul Ma'mur, then they asked, Ya Allah, we used to do the tawaf of that. Can you build something else that we can do the tawaf of? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has another structure built, which is right underneath Baytul Ma'mur. That structure is above the Kaaba, meaning the Kaaba is a replica. For who? For the ins and the jinns to do tawaf of. Just like the way the angels do tawaf of a Kaaba up in the heavens, this Kaaba that we have here is for the humans and the jinns to do tawaf of, correct? But this Kaaba is a replica. In Urdu, what do we call it? Thank you so much. In Urdu, you call a replica shabi. So where did we get this idea of creating shabis? Where do we get this idea from? From Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He himself, he created a shabi of the Kaaba for who? The angels to go around. Then he created a shabi of that for the humans to go around. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created these replicas, created these shabis, what is he saying? You know, as long as these things are pointing towards me, I don't have a problem with you creating them. Why? Because I myself create them. So these shabis that we have, these replicas that we have, for example, the replica that we have here, it goes to Abu Abdullah al-Hussain al-Islam. Imam Hussain al-Islam, he points towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says what? We honored the precincts of this masjid, Masjid al-Aqsa. And that Masjid al-Aqsa, like I said, according to some narrations, is a masjid up in the heavens. Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala take the Holy Prophet to this Meraaj? What was the reason for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to take the Holy Prophet to this Meraaj? This is where you understand the difference between Khalil and Habib. This is where you'll understand the difference. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in this same verse, he says that I took the Holy Prophet to the Meraaj. Why? So that I can show him from my signs. So that I can show him from my signs. Some of the Muslims, they say that the Holy Prophet, Nauzubillah, he went to the Meraaj to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He went on the Meraaj to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot be seen no matter what. When Hazrat Musa alayhi salam says to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Allah, can you show yourself to me? What does Hazrat Musa alayhi salam reply? When Hazrat Musa alayhi salam says this, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reply? He says, Ya Musa, you will never be able to see me. You will never be able to, not in this world, not in the next world, you will never be able to see me. So how's the Holy Prophet going to the Meraaj to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in this verse that he's not coming up to see me. He's coming up to see what? To see my signs, from my signs, min ayati. Min, from my signs. So the Meraaj of the Holy Prophet, the purpose of that Meraaj was what? For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to show the Holy Prophet his signs. Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam, he's known as Khalilullah. The Holy Prophet, he's known as Habibullah. If you want to understand the difference, or if you want to know what proof do we have that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves the Holy Prophet more than Hazrat Ibrahim, when it came to Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what does he do? He just opens the eyes of Hazrat Ibrahim and he allows him to see what was in the heavens. That was it. He didn't bring him up. He didn't raise him up like the way he rose the Holy Prophet from Meraaj. No, Hazrat Ibrahim was able to only see what was in the heavens. And when he sees what was in the heavens, what does Hazrat Ibrahim see? He sees that there's a very bright star. And around that bright star, there are smaller specks that are very bright. And he says to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Allah, what is that very bright star that I see? When he says it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that that is my servant Ali ibn Abi Talib. He sees light. When he says this, then Hazrat Ibrahim, he asks, this is from Tafsir Burhan. Then he asks, Ya Allah, what are these shiny lamps that I see, these lights, the smaller lights that I see around him? He says that these are his Shia. These lights that you see, Ya Ibrahim, these are his Shia. That's when Hazrat Ibrahim says, Ya Allah, make me one of his Shia. Make me one of his Shia. The verse in the Quran where it says that where Hazrat Ibrahim was one of the Shias, one of his Shias, Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam, he says that he was a Shia of Amir al-Mu'mineen. But the Mufassirin of the Quran, they say that the Zamir, the pronoun, who, it goes to Nabiullah Nuh alayhi salam. Why? Because a few verses before this verse, Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam's zikr is happening. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam. But Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says, no, this actually has to do with what Hazrat Ibrahim said when his eyes opened up. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed him the heavens. But the difference between Khalil and Habib, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keeps Khalil on the ground and he just opens up his eyes. He opens up the veils for him to see. But when it comes to Habib, he doesn't just open up. No, he brings him up to a point where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself says, Qaba Hussain. There were only 2 bows length or closer. Between what? Between Abd, Ma'bud. Between creator, creation. There were only about 2 bows length or less. These 2 bows length. This isn't literal. Even this is figurative. These 2 bows lengths or less, this isn't supposed to be literal. It's not like, if this is a bow, it's not like the Holy Prophet's on this side and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is on that side. No. There is, for that to happen, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to have some sort of border. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has some sort of jism, some sort of body. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not have a body. When the Holy Prophet goes on Meraaj, he himself, he says, when I went past Sidratul Muntaha, there came a point where I see a cloud of pearls. And in that cloud, I see that there's a bed. And on that bed, I see that there's a picture. And when I look at that picture, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks, "Oh my Habib, do you know who that is?" The Holy Prophet himself, he says that, yes, that's Ali ibn Abi Talib. That's Ali ibn Abi Talib. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says what? He says, Ya Muhammad, I want you to marry Ali ibn Abi Talib to your daughter Fatima. I want you to marry Ali ibn Abi Talib to your daughter Fatima. And this Meraaj, it didn't happen just one time. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he says that the Holy Prophet went on Meraaj 120 times in his lifetime. 120 times in his lifetime, correct? How long did he live? He was 63 when he passed away. If he went on 120, or about 120 times in his lifetime, that means how many Merajas per year? About 2 Merajas per year, correct? Imam Sadiq alayhi salam himself, he says that every time he went on Meraaj, the most important thing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him was about the wilayat of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. Every time he went on Meraaj, the most important thing that he told them was the wilayat of Amir al-Mu'mineen, and tell the people about the wilayat of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Tell the people. That's why from the beginning to the end of his life, the Holy Prophet was doing what? He was telling the people that after me, my representative after me is going to be Ali alayhi salam. Why? Because this was a command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Every time he would go on the Meraaj, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would tell him to do that. And what did people do? They left him. They left him. But during this journey, there comes a point in time when the Holy Prophet is going on this journey. He goes and he meets the prophets. Before Sidratul Muntaha, he goes and he meets all the prophets. And when he meets those prophets, he meets Hazrat Musa alayhi salam, he goes, he meets Hazrat Ibrahim, he meets Hazrat Adam, he meets Hazrat Yusuf, he meets all these prophets. When he goes and speaks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly, where no one was able to hear anything that he was to say, he comes back. When he comes back, he meets Hazrat Musa alayhi salam. Hazrat Musa alayhi salam, he asks him, Ya Muhammad, what did your Lord say to you? The Holy Prophet, he says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he ordered my community to pray 50 times a day. 50 times a day. Can you imagine praying 50 times a day? 5 times a day is very difficult for all of us. 50 times a day. But in the time of Hazrat Musa alayhi salam, that's how much they used to pray. It was wajib for them to pray that much. But he meets Hazrat Musa alayhi salam. Hazrat Musa alayhi salam, he says, Ya Muhammad, go back and tell your Lord that this is too much. Lessen it. Hazrat Musa alayhi salam tells the Holy Prophet, this is going to be too much for your community. Tell Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to lessen it. The Holy Prophet, he goes back. When he goes back, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lessens it. He comes back, he meets Hazrat Musa. Hazrat Musa alayhi salam, he asked him, Ya Rasulullah, what did he say? He lessened it and he made it 40. Ya Rasulullah, this is still too much for your community. The person that we should actually thank for making it 5 times is actually Hazrat Musa alayhi salam. Okay? But he goes 40 times. He comes back, Hazrat Musa alayhi salam is waiting. What did he say? He made it 30. Ya Rasulullah, this is still too much for your community. He goes, he comes back, Hazrat Musa alayhi salam still waiting. What did he say? 20. This is still too much. He goes and he comes back. When it comes to 5, he meets Hazrat Musa alayhi salam. And Hazrat Musa alayhi salam, when he meets him, he says, Ya Rasulullah, what did he say? He made it 5. From 10, he made it 5. Hazrat Musa alayhi salam, he looks at the Holy Prophet and he says, Ya Rasulullah, this is still too much for your community. That's how the narration is. The Holy Hazrat Musa alayhi salam, he says, this is still too much for, it's too difficult for your community to bear. That's when the Holy Prophet, he says, Ya Musa, even if it's too difficult for my community to bear, I'm too ashamed to go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and tell him that. I'm going to leave it the way it is. So that's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he tells the Holy Prophet, O my Prophet, the sawab that your community would get for praying that 5 times a day will be equivalent to the 50 times a day that Nabiullah Musa's community would have to pray. Why? Because the Holy Prophet did not go back. Because of that shame that the Holy Prophet had. But it tells you what? It tells you how much you and I could bear when it comes to worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When two prophets themselves, they are saying that yes, this community will not be able to bear that much. It tells you what? How weak we are. But does that mean that we need to be that weak? No. Within the community, you see people do what? You see people do that 52 units of prayer every day. You see people that do that. But that is what? That is a minority, that's not the majority. The majority, they just want to do the bare minimum and go on with their life. And you see that these people exist everywhere. When it comes to their job, what do they want to do? The most minimum that they can do and get away with. When it comes to school, what do they want to do? The most minimum they can and get away with. So when it comes to religion, you have these type of people too. They just want to do the most minimum they can and get away with it. Get away with it. But this is the difference between the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the justice of the world. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, you know what? You want to do the bare minimum, you can do the bare minimum. I accept it. But when it comes to work, if you were to do the bare minimum and the boss was to find out, what would you do? If you were to do the bare minimum at school and the teacher knew that all you do is the bare minimum, what do? They'll just give you the bare minimum. Great, that's it. You got your C, you're done. That's it. But on this Meraaj, the Holy Prophet, he meets 3 types of individuals. Every time, when he goes, he meets one individual, the individual calls out to the Holy Prophet. The Holy Prophet does not respond. When he goes a bit further, another individual calls out to the Holy Prophet. Oh, the Holy Prophet does not respond. He goes a bit further, and then the Holy Prophet himself, he says that, I heard the voice of a woman, she calls out to me. And she tells me to speak to her. But I did not heed any attention, and that was it. So Jibreel asked him, Ya Rasulullah, what did you see, what did you hear on this journey? The first thing I heard was a person calling out. And he was telling me that he wants to speak to me. I didn't say anything. He said, Ya Rasulullah, that person that was calling out was a Jewish person. If you were to heed his call and you were to speak to him, your community would have become Jews. The second person was a Christian. If you were to talk to him, if you were to answer their call, your community would have turned into Christians. The third person, the woman that you saw, or the woman that you were hearing, that is the world. If you were to answer her call, then your community would have left the afterlife and they've only gone after this life. The fact that you left all of these is what? It's a testament to what? That your community is neither going to be Jewish, your community is neither going to be Christian, and your community is not going to only look at this life. They're going to worry about the afterlife also. And how should we worry about the afterlife? In this journey itself, the Holy Prophet, what does he see? He sees hell that was opened up. And the people that he saw in that hell. For example, he sees some individuals whose heads, they're constantly weighed down by a giant boulder. A giant boulder. The Holy Prophet, he asked Jibril, who are these people that I'm looking at? Jibril, he says, Ya Rasulullah, these people, their head is constantly bowed down like this. Why? Because these people, they used to sleep during Maghrib and Isha time. They used to sleep during Maghrib time. They used to sleep during Maghrib time. Now, when it comes to analyzing this hadith, sleeping during Maghrib time, are we supposed to take that literally or no? Does that mean that we don't pray Maghrib on time? Because in the time of the Holy Prophet and before, there was no TV, there was no video games, there was none of that. What was it that they were doing? They just go to work and come back home and sleep. Work, come back home and sleep. That was it. That was their life. Whether they were working in the fields, whether they were trading, whatever the case was. They just do the work, come back and sleep. But today what's happening? We waste time. Wasting time in the sense that video games. Wasting time in the sense that movies. Wasting time in the sense that during namaz time, during prayer time. I'm not saying, you know what, you should completely shut that off. No, I'm not saying that, because we live in this time period. But yes, there are certain things that you shouldn't watch, and you all know that. That's it. That's about it. But during namaz time, whatever it is, you should stop it and do your namaz and come back. Do your prayers and come back and do it. The Holy Prophet, he goes further. When he goes further, he sees another group of people. And this group of people, he sees that fire is going through their mouth and is coming out from the end. Fire is going through their mouth and it's coming out through the end. The Holy Prophet, he asks Jibril, what am I seeing? Why are these people being punished like this? And that's when Jibril says, Ya Rasulullah, these are the people who would put fire in their own bellies. And the Holy Prophet, when he hears this, he goes, what do you mean? He says, these are the people that would not give the yateems their due haqq. They would not give the orphans their due right. What their right was, these people, they usurped it and they themselves put it in their stomach. And the Quranic verse itself says what? That these people are putting fire in their stomach. The Holy Prophet sees this. He goes further. He goes further. Then he sees a bunch of women that are being crucified. He goes, Jibril, what have they done? Jibril, he says, Ya Rasulullah, these were the women who were eating and who took the wealth of the husbands after they passed away, even though the children did not belong to that man. Meaning these were the women that committed zina while they were still married to a fulan person, and they told that fulan person that this child belongs to you. You see that today in the community we live in. Isn't this what happens? I'm not talking about the Shia community. Inshallah, it doesn't happen within the Shia community. Within the Muslim community, it's starting to occur. But in the Western community as a whole, you see that this happens. Where the women, they're married to one person, the child belongs to someone else, the husband does not know. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, these types of women, this is how they're going to be punished. This is a salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. When it comes to the Meraaj, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like I said, the reason Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called the Holy Prophet to this Meraaj was to show him some of his sign. Min ayatihi. That min is denoting what? Some of his signs. Correct? What were some of these signs that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was showing him? Another verse of the Quran, it says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed him his greatest signs. And Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, he says that we are the greatest signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We Ahlul Bayt are the greatest signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what was it that the Holy Prophet saw? He himself, he says that when I went to the Meraaj, I see Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, Imam Hassan alayhi salam, Imam Hussain alayhi salam. He takes the names of all of the Imams from Amir al-Mu'mineen all the way to the 12th Imam, and he says what? He says that I saw them praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a sea of light. I saw all of them praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a sea of light. That means that they existed before they even came down to this world. They were praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before they came down. They existed in what form? In the form of light, in the form of nur. The Holy Prophet himself, there comes a point in time in Al-Burhan fi Tafsir al-Quran, he himself, he says, when he was going on the Meraaj, there came a point where he says, when I returned back to myself, when I returned back to myself, what does this mean? When I came back to myself, when I turned back to myself, this means that the form that he took when he was going on Meraaj was different. How was it different? Nur, correct? But even that nur, there has to be different intensities of that nur. There has to be different intensities of that nur. If there wasn't a difference in intensity of the nur, then Jibreel could have also gone through Sidratul Muntaha. If there wasn't a difference in intensity of that nur, then all of the other prophets, all of the other angels should have been able to go through Sidratul Muntaha. But when they get to that place, what does Jibreel say? He says, Ya Rasulullah, I can't even step 1 foot past this point. If I do, my wings will burn off. My wings will burn off. That tells you what? That tells you that the nur of Muhammad was something different than the nur of Jibreel alayhi salam. The light of the Holy Prophet was different from the light of the angels. That's why the Holy Prophet was able to go through that. So then that's when the Holy Prophet said, when I returned back, when he came back from Sidratul Muntaha, he had to what? The intensity of that light had to come back to what was required for that world underneath Sidratul Muntaha. Now when he came back from the Meraaj, the intensity of that light was what? A bit dim, and it was only for what? What was required of this world, for humans. The Meraaj of the Holy Prophet, it's not just one way. This inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un, it has a different meaning to them. It has a different meaning to us. What meaning does it have to the Ahlul Bayt? They are directly from that light, so when they return, they will return back to that light. We are from what? We are from what was left over after their creation. So when we return, we will return back to whatever that was left over after their creation. So that inna lillah that everyone recites, that has different meanings. It has a different meaning for us, it has a different meaning to them. Salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. When Iblis, when he says, Ya Allah, I don't do sajda, I will not do sajda to anybody except you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he asked Iblis, Ya Iblis, what is it that prevented you? What is it that stopped you from doing sajda to him whom I created with my own 2 hands? Allah, when he says this, what does Iblis reply? He says, Ya Allah, you created me from fire and you created him from dirt. Correct. This shows what? This shows takabbur. This shows takabbur. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded you to do something. When you don't do it, why aren't you doing it? Now, when I say you, I mean the you general. I'm not looking at one specific person. Okay, I'm saying the general you. Why is it? Then I should use we. Why is it that we don't do it? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded us to do something. When He's commanded us to do something and we don't do it, it's why. That is that sifat of takabbur that was in Iblis that we are seeing in ourselves. That was an order from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But what did He say? He says, no. And then a narration says that Iblis, he says, Ya Allah, I don't want to bow down to anyone except you. I don't want to bow down to anyone except you. MashaAllah, isn't this what Tawheed is? Isn't this what Islam is? That you don't bow down to anyone except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? If we were to look at what Islam means, isn't this what the Wahhabis would say? This is true Islam? You don't bow down to anyone except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? When He says this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells Iblis, Ya Iblis, I don't want you to worship me the way you want. I want you to worship me the way I want. I want you to worship me the way I want. And I want to be worshipped by you doing sajda to Adam. By you doing sajda to Adam. Iblis, he says no. No. He says no. During the Holy Prophet's time, he comes to the Holy Prophet because, Ya Rasulullah, is it still possible that I'm forgiven for the sin that I committed? The Holy Prophet said, yes, it is. It is. Ya Rasulullah, what can I do? He goes, the mistake that you made, correct it. He goes, how should I correct it? Hazrat Adam, he's passed away now. He's long gone. What should I do? The Holy Prophet, he says, go do sajda to the grave of Hazrat Adam. Go do sajda to. If it was haram to do sajda towards graves, if it was haram to do sajda towards graves, then the Holy Prophet would not have told Iblis to go do sajda towards the grave of Hazrat Adam. When he tells him to go do sajda towards the grave of Hazrat Adam, what does Iblis say? He says, no. I won't do it. He was so adamant that this is what? This is kufr. He was so adamant that no, this isn't tawheed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself, He says this is tawheed. But Iblis says, no, Ya Allah, I know better than you. This isn't tawheed. That I know better than you. That I know better than you, it's not just Iblis. We all have that within ourselves. Ya Allah, I know better than you. It creeps up. And every Ramadan, I keep hearing this. Every Ramadan, Ya Allah, I know better than you. What do I mean? Oh my goodness, why do we have to break our fast when we go this certain distance? Why do we have to break our fast? This is another form of I know better than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For God's sakes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says break your fast when you go a certain distance, break your fast. What's the big deal? There's nothing wrong, just break your fast. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it easy, but we're making it harder. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, break your fast, just break your fast. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. I'm not going to take much more of your time. It's already about 10:20. But the amal of Shab Meraaj, we did some before because, mashallah, everyone came so early. We decided to do the amal before the lecture. So the amal for Shab Meraaj, 12 units of prayer, 12 rakat namaz, 2 rakat each. You break it down into 2 rakat each, and the same way that you recite Fajr namaz, Fajr salat, that's the same way that you recite it. After you're done with the prayer, there's supposed to be surahs that you're supposed to recite 7 times each. Basically, Surah Al-Hamd 7 times, Surah Al-Ikhlas 7 times, Surah Al-Kafirun 7 times, Surah Al-Falaq 7 times, Ayatul Kursi 7 times, Surah Al-Mawzatain 7 times, and that's it. Those surahs and Ayatul Kursi 7 times each, that's the amal. Afterwards, there's a dua that's supposed to be recited. And after the dua, one of the most important amals for tonight is ziyarat Amir al-Mu'mineen. Ziyarat Amir al-Mu'mineen, ziyarat Rasulullah too, but ziyarat Amir al-Mu'mineen specifically for this night of Laylatul Meraaj. And when you see a lot of the ziyarat about days that are connected to the Holy Prophet, you see that a lot of the time ziyarat Amir al-Mu'mineen is recommended to be recited. Ziyarat Amir al-Mu'mineen. For example, 27th of Rajab. You see that the recommended ziyarat to be recited is ziyarat Amir al-Mu'mineen. When it comes to the ziyarat of Amir al-Mu'mineen, it's got 3 different types of ziyarat that you can recite. One is known as ziyarat al-Rajabiyya, one is I believe the 4th ziyarat of Amir al-Mu'mineen in the Mafati, and it's labeled ziyarat number 4. And then there's another ziyarat that's known as ziyarat Laylatul Meraaj for Amir al-Mu'mineen. When you get to, for example, the wiladat of Rasulullah, one of the recommended ziyarats to recite is ziyarat Amir al-Mu'mineen. When you get to the shahadat of Rasulullah, one of the recommended ziyarats is to recite ziyarat Amir al-Mu'mineen. This itself, it tells you what? This itself tells you that there really isn't a difference between Muhammad and Ali. The only difference between Muhammad and Ali sallallahu alayhim is what? That the Holy Prophet is Nabi, he's Rasul. That's the difference. But other than that ukhda of Nabuwat and Risalat, there's no difference. That's why the Holy Prophet, he says that all of us are Muhammad. The first is, the last is, the middle is, all of us are Muhammad. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He keeps us on this path of Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the reappearance of Imam Zaman alayhi salam. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for us to be able to sacrifice our life for him and his cause. Walhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Brothers, please recite Surah Fatiha for the marhumeen of Brother Farhan and all other marhumeen. Bismillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma aghfirhu. Before we end, there was one question that I do really want to answer, and it's that question about how is it possible that the Holy Prophet was able to do Meraaj. When it comes to possibilities, there's 3 types of possibilities. Okay, one is logical possibility, philosophical possibility. 2 is practical possibility. And 3 is scientific possibility. Meaning what? Meaning scientific possibility is that we're able to do something, but we don't have the means to do it right now. We don't have the means to do it right now. That's scientific possibility. And I'll explain each of these. Logical possibility is that logically there's nothing that prevents it from happening. Logically there's nothing that prevents it from happening. And when it comes, that's logical, philosophical. And practical possibility or impossibility is what? That right now it's practically possible or practically impossible. Meaning what? Practical possibility, the Awam an-Nas are able to do it. Meaning what? Meaning it's possible for us to travel across the ocean. Yes or no? Yes, that's a practical possibility. There was a time when they weren't able to do it. Now we're able to travel across the ocean, but we're able to do it in how many hours? from England to New York is about 7 hours, I believe. 7 hours, I think, huh? 7, 8 hours, something like that. We're able to cross that long distance in a short amount of time, correct? This is what? This is practically possible. We're doing it right now. Scientific possibility. It means that science does not prevent us from being able to do it. Meaning, we've already gone on the moon. Now, the time period that we're living in, what are we trying to do? We're trying to go to Mars. The difference between going to the moon and going to Mars is what? No, not in terms of years. The difference is that we don't have the means. We're trying to create the means to go to Mars. Meaning what? We're trying to create the means to go that longer distance. That's what we're trying to do. We can already go to outer space, but we're trying to create the means to go that longer distance. But science says that yes, it's possible. You're able to do it. Logical possibility, logical impossibility. Logical means what? Meaning that 2 plus 2 is 4. It will never equal 5, for example. If you want to make 2 plus 2 equal 5, then that would mean what? That 2 is even and odd at the same time. Correct? And that is impossible for the number 2 to be even and odd at the same time. Or another logical impossibility, existence and non-existence, one and at the same time. You can't exist and non-exist at the same time. You're either existing in one instance or non-existing, correct? Now, when it comes to the Meraaj, which one of these possibilities? Is it logically impossible? No. Logically, it's not impossible. Scientifically, is it impossible right now? Right now, scientifically, we can say that it is impossible. Meaning that we don't have the means. We don't have the means right now, correct? But that means for that Meraaj is not means of Ma'diyat. It's not, this means is supposed to be means of Ruhaniyat. Okay? Or the third, philosophical. Logically, philosophically, it's possible. Scientifically, it's possible. Practically, the only way that it would be practically possible is when scientifically you're able to do it, correct? Now, when it comes to the Meraaj, even today, and I know there are scientists here, if you go back and you type, or if you go to Google and you type in teleportation, you'll come to articles that say that scientists have been able to teleport. They've been able to teleport atoms. They've been able to teleport not just light, but yes, especially light, but they've been able to teleport atoms from one place to another. If you and I can understand the laws of physics to such an extent that we're able to teleport an atom from point A to point B without that atom going that distance, then why is it impossible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who created the laws of physics themselves, why is it impossible for him to take his Habib from point A to point B? It's not impossible. It's possible. We as human beings, we've understood these laws of physics and we can do this. Yet we question Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being able to do it. So even from a scientific point of view, it's not possible. Or even from a scientific point of view, it is possible. But inshallah, we'll go deeper into this some other time. Tomorrow night we do have a lecture, and it's going to be the Rawanagi of Tayyab Hussain al-Islam. And come rain or sunshine, I will be here. Inshallah, we all get here on time tomorrow. We all get here on time tomorrow, so we can leave on time. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Allahumma salli ala السلام علیکم یا صدیقۃ فاطمۃ الزہرا سیدۃ النساء العالمین. السلام علیکم یا مولانا یا حسن المجتبیٰ. السلام علیکم یا غریب الغرباء یا ابا عبداللہ. السلام علیکم یا مولانا علی ابن الحسین. السلام علیکم یا مولانا یا محمد ابن علی. السلام علیکم یا مولانا یا جعفر ابن محمد. السلام علیکم یا مولانا یا موسیٰ ابن جعفر. السلام علیکم یا مولانا یا علی ابن موسیٰ. السلام علیکم یا مولانا یا محمد ابن علی. السلام علیکم یا مولانا یا علی ابن محمد. السلام علیکم یا مولانا یا حسن ابن علی. السلام علیکم یا مولانا یا صاحب العصر زمان. علمان 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 من الفتن الزمان. عجل اللہ تعالی فرجک و ظہورک وجعلنا من انصارک ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ. Please, before we dua Imam Zaman, before we all Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allahumma kulli walika al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan salawatuka alayhi wa ala fi hadhihi as-sa'a wa fi kulli sa'a waliyan wa hafidhan wa qa'idan wa nasiran wa malinan wa mu'inan hatta tuskinahu ardaka tawwan wa tumatti'ahu fiha tawila. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad.
اللهم صل على
having their program tomorrow.
For from Meraaj this morning?
No, they don't like. They didn't mention Meraaj. They just mentioned Laylatul Bathrat.
Oh, there's no Jannah.
Yeah, but then that's the thing. They don't. They have never mentioned Meraaj whatsoever on the 22nd. So I was like, okay,
No, I know. There's some people that do Meraaj, some people that do
don't.
Kumar? Put it towards.
Yeah, but it's like I don't want to. Obviously, I have to come here. Like,
رائٹ ہینڈ سے فرحان بھائی کہہ رہے رائٹ ہینڈ سے لے میں نے الٹے ہاتھ سے
نہیں آپ سے دیا تھا یہ غلط لیا تھا. اب دیکھو آپ یہ پیسے ختم ہی نہیں ہوں گے, بس برکت ہی برکت.
میں نے آپ کو میسج کیا تھا نا وہ ابھی کیا
دیا میں نے.
نہیں فرحان بھائی کے